We're going to go ahead and get started with this Pramila Jayapal story here. Let's give a huge shout out here to Case Study QB. He clipped this. I'm glad he clipped this interview. I think I probably wouldn't have, I don't think I would have seen this because I don't watch Joy Reid, but Case Study clips a lot of her stuff. But Joy Reid had an interview here with Pramila Jayapal talking about what has happened post midterms. Republicans are taking back the House. Obviously, there are new progressives that are now in the House as well. And Pramila Jayapal is going to discuss some of the accomplishments or what she feels are accomplishments from the Biden administration, and that she is very hopeful. But there are some things I do want to point out here from this interview that I do think she was not being 100% correct about. I think she was being disingenuous with part of this interview. So let's go ahead and get into the readout.
The 2022 midterms were a huge success for progressive Democrats. Of the 18 candidates the Progressive Caucus endorsed this cycle, 16 have won their races so far, including
I wanted to pause this here. So these are some of the new progressive Congress members here. And I know for some reason this is a little bit blurred, but I believe I went over these already in another interview. Some of the ones that you probably already know is Maxwell Frost and, of course, Summer Lee. They have been talked about like heavily. I do want to point out something here, though. I think there's one of them. I'm trying to remember the names. Like I said, it's a little blurry. I forget. But most of the new progressive members of Congress sided with the state of Israel and are against BDS. And I told you that this is something that is seeming to become a deal breaker, whether or not you support BDS or not, right? So Maxwell Frost, and you'll have to go back and watch this clip. It was a part of Breaking Points. Ryan Grimm talked about this. Oh, Case Study sent me that clip. Maybe I can show it later if I have time. But Maxwell Frost was actually one of the people that was like an activist for Palestinian rights, and then decided to switch over and become, anti-BDS, which is like this thing now where I guess if you want a seat in Congress or whatever, it's like you have to say you're against BDS, right? And if you don't say that you're against BDS, then it's like you have organizations like AIPAC that will put up a lot of money to try to prevent you from winning that race, right? So for me, and I told you guys, I stand firmly on this. For me, I support the Palestinian people. I support their right to have their freedom. And I do support BDS. And so for me, if I see a candidate, I don't care if you are progressive or not. If you tell me this is a red flag for me, if you tell me, hey, I'm for Medicare for all right, cool. Hey, I'm for canceling student loan debt. I'm for paid family leave. Cool. Hey, I'm against BDS. Pause. That's a test for me. That's a test, because if you're willing to throw Palestinian people under the bus, what are you willing to do to people like me? And some of the African-American progressive candidates have sold out with this too. Let's just be clear. So let's go back into the video, but I wanted to point that out.
The first Gen Z Congress member, Maxwell Frost of Florida, former Austin City Council member Greg Casar, and a trio of state representatives, Delia Ramirez in Illinois, Jasmine Crockett in Texas, and Summer Lee, the first black woman elected to the House from Pennsylvania, making this upcoming Democratic caucus the most progressive that we have seen in decades. Oh, okay, but there's one caveat. Republicans have officially taken control of the House. NBC News projects that they have reached that 218-seat threshold with a couple of races still uncalled. But even if it comes down to a majority of just one Republican, it does still give people like Kevin McCarthy and Marjorie Greene leverage over legislation, investigations, and funding the government over the next 2 years.
And by the way, I mentioned this earlier on RBN, but by the way, there were 31 Republicans that voted against, in a separate meeting, have voted against Kevin McCarthy becoming speaker. I've decided, nope, we don't want the dude. And the Freedom Caucus has decided to say, we have a list of demands that McCarthy is going to have to fulfill in order to get our vote. So now you have the Republicans in the House basically trying to force the vote, which is what the squad was supposed to do in reference to Nancy Pelosi, and they decided not to do, and they had that leverage. So Nancy Pelosi is now gone anyway. So you have to ask yourself, or they should ask themselves, was it worth it in the end? Let's carry on.
So what can this new larger group of progressives accomplish? Well, joining me now is Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal of Washington, who is the chair of the House Progressive Caucus. We have a very adorable picture. I'm going to show it to you. This is Maxwell Frost's selfie that he took. There you guys are. You guys are looking great. You look very happy. But now that you know that you're looking at a Kevin McCarthy speakership, are you less happy?
Well, of course. I mean, there's no question we would have been happiest if we could have held the House and done the rest of the agenda, which clearly the country responded to, Joy. I mean, when you look at the election results, and here's the thing, if you promise a bunch of things and you put together a diverse coalition, and then you deliver on things like climate change and student debt cancellation and the American Rescue Plan, people get excited and they want to come out and vote for you. If you say we're going to codify abortion rights and voting rights, so there's a lot of the agenda that we still have to get done.
We need to backtrack here just a second.
The speakership, are you less happy?
Well, of course. I mean, there's no question we would have been happiest if we could have held the House and done the rest of the agenda, which clearly the country responded to, Joy. I mean, when you look at the election results, and here's the thing, if you promise a bunch of things and you put together a diverse coalition, and then you deliver on things like climate change and student debt cancellation and the American Rescue Plan, people get excited. And
did you notice she said student loan cancellation? So she just going to leave out the fact, by the way, this is after the midterms, just to be clear. She just going to leave out the fact that a federal drug blocked it and struck it down? How is she going to, how do you leave that out? And by the way, this just happened. How do you leave out, yes, student loan debt cancellation, which, you know, a federal judge just came in and blocked that? How did she not mention that? This is how you gaslight the American people, because people who are not really paying attention to what's going on in reference to student loan like cancellation, if they only just watch this episode, they have no idea what is going on behind the scenes, that a federal judge has blocked it. So it's easy to just watch something like this and say, man, the Democrats did a lot. She doesn't even mention it. She acts like it's still happening. It's been blocked. Listen to this. Watch.
they want to come out and vote for you. If you say we're going to codify abortion rights and voting rights. So there's a lot of the agenda that we still have to get done.
And they're not codifying abortion right. Like she's talking about. So here's the thing. Pramila is talking about promises that they made, but she's talking about the promises as though they were accomplished. That's the gaslighting part. She's talking about it as though they actually got these things done. They did not get them done. And Joy Reid just kind of goes along with it like, where's the pushback? Let's go on. There's more.
But I will tell you that the power of the populist progressive movement across the country is clear. Yeah. It's clear with these candidates who are not just candidates that won in deep blue districts. Mm-hmm.
Let's go back to this chart right here. Progressive agenda. So they have check marks of the things that have been accomplished, right? So American Rescue Plan, yes. Largest investment in climate in U.S. history, check mark. Cap on prescription drug prices, check mark. Why is there a check mark for student loan debt relief? It was blocked. And we're going to get into this discussion with the interview with Brianna Joy Gray and Ro Khanna as well, because Ro Khanna asked him, Brianna asked Ro Khanna about that. And it's just hilarious to me. This is not a check mark. That shouldn't be a check mark. This is not accomplished. You know, this is like, what is it? Zombie in the air? LMOL, this is ridiculous. Like, what? Like, I don't know. It's like for those of you who like to cook, and like, I like to cook, right? You know, it's like you're about to make cupcakes and you mix up the batter. You put the batter in the cupcake pan, but you never put the pan in the oven. It's like that. Do you get cupcakes if you don't put the pan in the oven? No, you don't. Let's go back in.
These candidates who are not just candidates that won in deep blue districts, they are candidates who won in very competitive frontline districts, like in Pennsylvania. In Oregon, we got 2 progressives elected in frontline districts in Oregon. And it matches the populist ballot initiatives that won across the country, right? Like legalizing marijuana, raising the minimum wage, capping interest rates on medical debt. These are all things that want expanding Medicaid in a state like South Dakota.
Absolutely.
These are all things that passed in the states. These are not things that have passed on the federal level. Thank you for proving my point, Pramila, that you get more accomplished when it comes to progressive policies through the states. If you have a state like South Dakota, a red state, that has just passed Medicaid expansion, what does that tell you? If you have a state like Nebraska that just passed $15 minimum wage, when your own Senate won't even pass $15 minimum wage on the federal level, what does that tell you? So Pramila Jayapal is just proving my point. You're better off doing shit through the local level. Now, that is not to say that you don't need legislation passed on the federal level. Yes, absolutely you do. But she is basically proving the point that I've been telling you guys, that if you want to get progressive policies passed, you have a faster chance of doing it on the local level. Thank you, Pramila.
So these are the things that won. And I think the lesson for us here is we might have to be an opposition party in the House with Republican leadership, last line of defense, but we also have to be a proposition party. We have to show people what we stand for, give people hope that if we get into office, we will do what we did again in this last term, pass more stuff that lifts working people, poor people, people of color up.
Well,
but the problem is, how are you going to pass more? She said pass more stuff. How are you going to pass more policies now that the Republicans have control over the House? And even when you were passing those policies in the House, they would fail in the Senate. And that's something that needs to be addressed. Like, you can't sit here and just pretend like you still have control of the House, because you don't. So I think she's being disingenuous here to sit here and make people think, yeah, we're just going to pass more stuff. No, you're not. I just told you guys, the Freedom Caucus, they're already rising up against Kevin McCarthy's possibility of being speaker. They're already coming with the list of demands. You think they're going to let your policies get through? I don't know.
Here's the thing. So I mean, I know student loan debt relief. I'll take that one for just a moment, because I know for a lot of people, not just young people, but folks who can't buy a house because they still have it was a big deal. The fear now is that the vengeful other side, that their goal will be to try to take away those things, to somehow repeal that legislation, to go after that, because they're very much against it. They filed lawsuits about it. Is there enough of a Democratic threshold and enough of a crossover sort of normie Republican threshold to hang on to the game?
Well, the line of defense is going to be in the Senate and the White House, right? So, I mean, we may not be able to hold all the wins in the House. And in fact, what we might get in the House, I hate this, but what we might get is a really sharp contrast. Republicans trying to strip Social Security and Medicare, right?
Isn't it weird that they think that's a winning idea, that they're going to make old people poor?
Why do they think?
Joe Biden wanted to strip Social Security and Medicare once upon a time, too. Joy's not going to mention that, though.
That, stripping abortion rights is popular. Have they seen the polling across the country? I mean, I don't know that this is all going to be logical. And they're going to have a very slim margin in the House, which means that somebody tried to compare the Freedom Caucus and the Progressive Caucus, and I said, oh, I'm sorry, they're totally different.
Very different.
The Progressive Caucus is a caucus of yes. We know how to govern. We know how to push. We'll push. But we know how to govern. We know how to land the plane. We know how to get stuff done. We have real values that drive us.
The same Progressive Caucus that decided not to endorse Nina Turner's candidacy. That's the same Progressive Caucus that knows how to push. This is interesting to me, because it's just, she's making the Progressive Caucus sound like it's more progressive than it actually is. And it's not. Anytime you have, and I hate to bring him up all the time, but this is an obvious one. Anytime you have Ted Lieu is a part of the Progressive Caucus, Jim Clyburn is a part of the Progressive Caucus. How is that? They're not progressive. But she's making it seem like, oh yeah, the Progressive Caucus, we're in there, we're fighting, we're pushing, and we're really getting things done. The same Progressive Caucus wouldn't even support the actual progressive candidate, which was Nina Turner. Shontel Brown is not progressive. Shontel Brown is corporate. But that's the same Progressive Caucus that is actually pushing and fighting back. The same Progressive Caucus that decided to retract that letter, that Ukraine letter calling for diplomacy. That's the same caucus that's supposed to be pushing and fighting back. Okay.
Freedom Caucus is a caucus of no. They don't know how to govern. I don't know what they stand for, and they really want to blow things up. And so I think that's the fight.
No, whoa, let's go back here. So now she's going to talk about the Freedom Caucus. So listen to this.
All right, they're totally different.
Very different.
The Progressive Caucus is a caucus of yes. We know how to govern. We know how to push. We'll push. But we know how to govern. We know how to land the plane. We know how to get stuff done. We have real values that drive us. The Freedom Caucus is a caucus of no. They don't know how to govern. I don't know what they stand for. And they really want to blow things up. And
the Freedom Caucus, she doesn't know what they stand for. They don't know how to govern. These are the same people that right now are trying to use their leverage to push Kevin McCarthy to agree to their demands in order for their vote for speaker. They don't know how to govern. You don't know what they stand for. These are the people trying to use their leverage, which is something that the progressives have not done. The squad did not use their leverage to force the vote for Medicare for all against Nancy Pelosi's speakership. The progressives have not used their leverage when it came to passing legislation and holding up legislation. So I'm not a fan of the Freedom Caucus here, but the Freedom Caucus seems to be willing to use their leverage, which is something that the progressives were not willing to do. But Pramila Jayapal tells you they don't know how to govern, and she doesn't know what they stand for.
So I think that's the fight you're going to see now between the Marjorie Taylor Greenes and maybe some more, moderate members who might have won in blue districts. They're going to have to run again in 2 years. And they're going to have to decide, do they want to be the party of Donald Trump and continue to do that, or do they actually want to try and work with us to get some things done?
I think they stand for impeaching Hunter Biden, even though he's not president. But let's go on to the lame duck. I have to talk lame duck. Sorry for my audience. I got to do some nerdy stuff here with the Congresswoman. The lame duck then now becomes really important.
Yes.
Because it is the last chance for those who are not familiar with the way kind of it works, is that you guys now have the current caucus is still in place until the new Congress comes in January. So there's a possibility that you guys can get some priorities done. What would be at the top of the list? Because we know that there's an issue with DACA.
Yes.
And there might be an opening. We're hearing some reporting that there might be an opening in the Senate to do something on DACA. Voting rights would be great, because obviously, clearly, we need some work on that.
She mentions DACA, voting rights. Listen to this.
And police reform, I know, was still left on the table. What do you think could, in theory, get done in the lame duck?
Well, immigration.
Notice she didn't mention health care. You guys catch that? She mentioned DACA, voting rights, and police reform. She didn't even mention health care. So that lets you know how much what they really think is important to them.
DACA and farm worker modernization, I mean, those two populations are bipartisan. They both got bipartisan votes. So the hope is that we can get to something that we can pass in this lame duck session with this Senate and this House. We also do need to make sure to take some tools that they're going to use to hold us hostage off the table. So that's the debt ceiling. We got to take the debt ceiling off the table so they don't try to strip abortion rights again and reproductive health care from us. Well, they've stripped abortion rights, but reproductive health care from us. And then we're going to have to pass some appropriations bills, because that's what funds the government, and that needs to get done also.
But let me give Speaker Pelosi.
Well, the Supreme Court are the ones that stripped abortion rights, though. That came from the Supreme Court, Pramila.
her flowers. I mean, I think that history will look upon her as the greatest House Speaker really in modern history, since Sam Rayburn. I mean, there isn't anyone who's been more accomplished. You know, they can say whatever they want about it. This lady gets the job done.
She does.
The question I think that kind of hangs over is that she's done so much. Does she drop the mic?
Right.
And does she say, you know what, I have done so much. I mean, between passing Obamacare, all of the things Biden has gotten through, she shepherded through. We talked about that very difficult infrastructure bill. She got that through. Do you...
She's done so much, and yet the American people still don't have health care. She's done so much, and yet still everyone does not have health care in this country. And I'm bringing up that example for a reason, because there's something I'm going to show you later on when I get to the Pelosi story. Hold on to that. Hold on to the health care piece, because that is very crucial.
Expect her to remain, and obviously dealing with her husband and what the horrors that happened to him. God bless him. What do you think? Do you think she stays in?
I really don't know, and I think she can probably do whatever she wants. I think, you know, she is a phenomenal.
She can do it.
Well, she was right about that. Nancy Pelosi can do whatever she wants. Apparently so.
Do it in heels, by the way.
She can. And I'll tell you, I've traveled with her. I've had the honor of going on delegations overseas. She is incredible. I do think that there's a hunger across the caucus to, you know, sort of bring more people in and things like that. But if she wants to be speaker, I mean, minority leader is what it will be now that we're in the minority. I'm still trying to get used to that, Joy. But, you know, I think that she will, she'll probably be able to do that. So let's see what happens. They do not have an accomplished speaker the way we had Speaker Pelosi. They have Kevin McCarthy, who is not going to be able to bring that caucus, in my view, together. They're going to fight with each other. It is going to be, instead of Dems in disarray, which always used to be a problem when we were described that way, this is Republicans in ruin, right? Like they are.
No, you guys are still that way. That part's funny to me. She said, instead of Dems being in disarray, remember how that was no, that's still a problem. That's still a problem. You guys have just learned how to silence certain people. That's why those things are happening. That's why. But it was really interesting to me how Joy could not even push back. She couldn't push back on the lies, you guys. She didn't even challenge her on the reference to the student loan debt cancellation. No pushback, no nothing. No codifying abortion. Those things have not happened. So it was really interesting and frustrating to me when I first watched that clip, because I was just thinking to myself, like, she is seriously going to sit here and pretend like those things happened when they did not happen. And that is the reason why Joy Reid will continue to get those interviews, because she's not going to actually challenge them. She's going to say just enough so that she still maintains access. That's access journalism. Very few politicians will come on if they know you're going to heavily challenge them. Very few.